Now available, paperback and e-readers. Isis, Bride of Dracula. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire Lord in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. One of my viewers asked me to do a video discussing the survival tips someone would need in New York City. As a resident of New York City all my life for 43 years, I think I can help them out and help them explain some of the things you're going to need to survive here in New York City. And the first thing you need to understand about New York City is that it's a very rough place. Unlike your suburban cities or your other urban cities, New York City is very rough. And it's not for greenhorns, because when it comes down to life in New York City, you either adapt or you're not going to survive here. Because when it comes down to this city, it's very rough because it's very fast paced and very competitive. Most people here in New York City are looking out for number one, and they don't have time to look out for anyone else. So when you come here, you have to understand that you are on your own and you are the only person who's going to look out for you here. Most times when people say that they're looking out for you, they are actually looking out for themselves, and there are a lot of predators here, and that's something you really need to understand when it comes to life in New York City. There are a lot of predators on every corner, and you have to be careful about who you trust, because when it comes down to life in New York City, trusting the wrong person can cost you your life, or it can cost you everything that you own. Now, when it comes down to New York City, a lot of people who are used to living in slower paced areas, they are going to have a major hard time adjusting to life in New York City, because if you live in some place like the South or the West or the Southwest, you're going to notice that the pace of New York City is a lot faster. Now, when it comes down to life in places like North Carolina, which I visited back in February, the pace is very slow. The days just go by really slow. But in New York City, 45 minutes, a lot can happen in 45 minutes. A lot can happen in 15 minutes. And you really have, it's something that just takes time to get used to, because things run very quickly here. You can go into a place like a McDonald's and they'll have your food ready in less than about 5 or 10 minutes. And most of the people are just going in and out. And in things like the subway, things are just moving very quickly. So you have to be ready for dealing with a very, very fast-paced place. When it comes down to New York, nothing is done very slow. Now, when it comes down to that roughness I talked about earlier, that's why you have to have your head on a swivel. You always have to be looking out for yourself, because, again, there are a lot of predators on the streets here in New York City. Now, New York City's crime rate has declined from the horror days of the 1980s and early 1990s, but it's still a very, again, rough place, and you have to have your eyes open when you're walking down the street, and every couple of feet or blocks you need to look behind yourself, because there are guys who are going to try to do things like pickpocket or try to just run up on you. So you have to have your eyes on a swivel and look out for yourself when you're walking down the street. Now, another thing that you have to understand about life in New York City, in addition to the fast pace and the competitiveness, is that you have to have a real plan here when you come here. Because everything is so fast paced and competitive, you really have to have a plan put together regarding how you're going to survive here in New York City, especially with your money, because you have to have your money right before you even think about getting on a plane or a bus or driving to this city, because New York City is extremely expensive. Right here in New York City, it's extreme. I can honestly tell you this. This is one of the most expensive places out here, and if you don't have your money right, you're not going to really make it here for long, because if you don't have a budget and a financial plan, you're going to wind up broke going out here and just trying to go back and forth every day. And a lot of people, they come to the city, but because they don't have a financial plan, they wind up becoming underwater because they just don't understand how much things cost you. I mean, if you go to even a small bodega here in the Bronx, a bagel is like $1.25 with cream cheese. And if you go to some of the higher end places like Whole Foods, that same bagel may cost you a dollar in the roll section, and in some of the other delis it may cost you $1 and some cents. But that's just the bagel itself. The cream cheese is extra. Now in the outer boroughs, you may get a break on some of the prices, but if you go into Manhattan, yeah, you better prepare to have some money in your pocket because the coffees there may cost you everywhere from $3 to $4, and if you go to a place like Starbucks, it starts at $5 and $6. But if you go in the outer boroughs, you might be able to save a few dollars because sometimes the prices there are a little lower. And one of the tricks you need to understand about Manhattan is that there is a dividing line regarding prices and costs, and that dividing line is 96th Street. If you go below 96th Street, the prices get higher, but if you go above 96th Street in Manhattan, the prices get lower. So you have to understand, once you go past 96th Street, you are going to be paying a lot of money for stuff, and you have to have a plan for spending money, especially if you go to work in a place like Manhattan. Now, when it comes down to your money, also you have to understand you have to have a big budget for your rent, because rent in New York is just, as many people as I've said, is too blank high. Now, a studio apartment here, they usually start at about $1,500-$1,600, and that's in a bad neighborhood like I live here in the South Bronx. And they go even higher than that in Manhattan. In Manhattan, the starting price is about $1,900, $2,100 for a studio. One bedroom is like $2,500, and two bedrooms maybe $3,000, $4,000, and a three bedroom that's $5,000, $6,000 a month. So you have to have your money right, and you have to have a really good job if you hope to stay here. Some people stay with roommates to make ends meet, but that's a very dicey situation because roommates come and go, and you don't know what type of person you're interacting with or you're going to be involved with. So in a roommate situation, understand that it can be in a state of flux, because a lot of times people they'll come to New York, they'll find out how hard it is and leave, or others will find opportunities and then they'll just go get their own place, and it can be a very dicey situation, and you could be stuck paying the whole rent or trying to find somebody else to help pay that rent before this landlord comes after you. So you have to have a financial plan for yourself. So if you're coming to New York, you have to have your money right, because if your money is right, you might be able to survive here, because then you can build up that savings and have that money there to take care of your day-to-day bills and stuff like that, because the rent itself is no joke, and also the electricity here is very expensive. So you might be paying, if you don't have it factored in the rent with your utilities, that's going to be at least about $120 every 2 months, or $100 every 2 months, depending on how much electricity you use. And if you use a lot of electricity, like have lights on and stuff, that's going to cost you some serious cash. Now, when it comes down to food, if you know how to cook, you can save a lot of money, because all that eating out, that can take all your money in one shot. Because again, these restaurants and these delis and stuff, they charge a lot of money in the inner boroughs, which is Manhattan, and the outer boroughs, which is Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. It's very expensive here to eat if you go to a place like a fast food or a restaurant. And if you're doing that every day, you are not going to have much money to save, because a breakfast here can, if you go in the outer boroughs, you get a egg sandwich or something like that. That's like $2 or $3. And if you get a juice with that, that's like $5 right there. If you go in Manhattan, that's going to be at least $9 or $10 minimum, because everything below 96th Street, the price goes through the roof. And if you go to a market like a Whole Foods, oh, you're going to be paying like at least $11, $12. And all of that money you could actually save on if you understand how to cook. If you don't understand how to cook, you can save a bunch of money here in New York. If you go to the supermarket and you buy stuff in bulk, you can save a bunch of money on things. But if you go out here and you're eating out every day, going to the fast food restaurants, going to the local restaurants, you're going to be broke by the end of the week once you get your paycheck. Now, the other thing you have to understand about New York City is that it's very competitive here and it is very hard to find jobs. Now, I've been out of work for 8 years and I'm a New York City resident and I struggle to find work. And it's going to be hard to find a job, and getting jobs really is based on who you know, not really what you know. And if you know the right people, you will have a faster track at a job than other people. So when you come here, you have to make sure you have a good network of people to help you find work, and you have to have a good support system to help you stay employed. Because once you get on a job here in New York, again, it is very competitive, and people are oftentimes plotting to get new people out of their jobs so they can bring their family members and their friends into that same position. So you have to always look out for yourself when you're on a job here in New York City, because people are always trying to think of a way to get you out and always talking to bosses about bringing somebody in. So you have to always look out for your job. Moreover, you always have to be looking for another opportunity. You can't really stay comfortable in jobs here, because most times a lot of the small businesses, they go out of business very quickly. They usually, some of them only last 1.5 to 2 years, and some of the jobs here, they don't really last that long. So you're always going to have to be looking for a job while you have a job, and that's how you survive here really in New York. You have to have a plan for how you want to live here, and you have to have a plan for your money when you're here. You always have to do, if you once you get a job, you have to start planning a budget for how you're going to pay your bills, and you have to start making a plan to really start saving money, because the jobs here are very unstable, and you have to have a plan to save your money so you can pay your bills once you're here, because it's very, very competitive here. People are constantly turning over in jobs. People are constantly moving around, and it is very busy here. You can go look out your window at 11, 12 o'clock, and there'll be people moving on the street. If you're used to being in a quiet area, it can be very hard to transition, because everything is always going on here in New York. It's a 24-hour city, and you will always see people walking down the street or taking rides on the subway and the bus. And speaking of the subway and the bus, that's how people get around here most of the time here in New York. If you have a car, it's a bit of a hassle here, because when it comes down to cars, if unless you know somebody in a garage, having a car on the street is a bit of a nightmare, because with all the parking rules and regulations, chances are you're going to get a ticket sooner rather than later, because when it comes down to parking, it's hard to get here in New York, and it's hard to get parking in front of your own house. Now, in the suburbs and other parts of the country, it's probably a little easier to get parking, but in New York, parking is a challenge. And with the alternate side of the street parking rules, you have to get up every morning and move your car from one side of the street to the next, so the street sweepers can come by and clean up. If you don't move your car, you're going to wind up with a ticket, because those alternate side of the street parking rules. Moreover, if you park your car in the wrong place, you wind up with a ticket. And if you leave it there, you're going to wind up with a boot. And a boot, that can take an entire day to fix, because you have to go and pay the ticket, then you have to bring the boot back to the parking violations people. So that can take an entire day out of your schedule, and that can take a day. You have to take an entire day off of work to deal with that. So that's something you really need to think about. And when it comes down to riding the buses and the subways, you have to, again, have your head on a swivel, especially on these buses. When it comes down to the bus, it can be crazy sometimes, because you oftentimes will have these people who have taken a K2 or they've smoked up, and they'll be on the bus, riding the bus, because they're illiterate and they can't really read signs on the subway. So they'll come here on the bus and they'll look at the landmarks and use that as a way to get on the bus. But while they're on the bus, they're looking to start drama, and you have to really watch out for yourself on the bus. And also you have to watch out for on the bus, because when these buses here in New York, they're very crowded. So you have to look out for your bag, and you have to look out for yourself. and you also have to look out for what's going on a bus, because buses, they're very crowded, and it's not something that you just go on and just sit and wait for your stop. But when it comes down to the bus, that's rough. Now, when it comes down to the subway, that's very unique to New York City, but you have to understand how the lines work, and when you have to understand how the trains work if you want to go to work back and forth. Now, we've had a bit of trouble here in New York City as it relates to the subways with a lot of delays and stuff. But what I think a lot of people are having really problems with is that they don't. A lot of people are coming new to New York and they really don't understand how the trains work. Now there have always been trains that get stuck in a tunnel for a couple of minutes due to congestion in rush hour, and there have been trains that have had delays. But if you want to get to work on time, you have to allocate time for those delays. That's something I learned to do when I was 14 years old, when I used to go to high school in Manhattan, and I always learned to allocate extra time because oftentimes there can be a delay on the trains or a line can wind up getting rerouted. So you have to understand how the subway works and you have to allocate extra time so you can make sure you get from one place to the next here in New York City. You just cannot get on a train and then think you're going to get there in 30 minutes. A lot of these people who believe in this so-called gentrification, they always come to New York and they're all upset because they're thinking it's like the suburbs. Oh, I can just get on a train and get to work in 20 minutes. No, it takes at least 45 minutes to an hour, and I usually allocate an entire hour if I'm going anywhere from the Bronx to Harlem. Now, if I'm going further than that, I allocate even more time because I understand that sometimes a line can get delayed. A train can get delayed, or a train can get rerouted. Like here in New York, if you're in the Bronx and you're on a 4 train, now if there's another stalled 4 train further down the line, or a stalled 5 train down the line, they may take that at 149th Street and Grand Concourse and then decide, we're going to take this 4 train down the Lexington Avenue line. Not the Lexington Avenue line, because the 4 train is the Lexington Avenue line. We may take that train down the the West Side, which is where the 123 goes, because there's a delay and we have to move these trains. So they may take that train down another route, and if you don't know where you're going, you wind up getting stuck or you wind up getting lost because you don't know how the trains work. And if you're here in New York, you have to understand how the trains work, and you have to also plan alternate routes in case one line winds up getting delayed. Now, if, for example, if you're on the West Side and you have to get to work on 50th Street and you're used to taking a 2 train, you have to really plan another alternate route if you're living in a place like the Bronx or Queens, by using another alternate route to get there. So now some people who live in the Bronx, that take the 2 train and they'll take it all the way to some place like 72nd Street and then catch a 1 train. But if your 2 train is stuck and you can't use that route, then you have to learn how to use the Lexington Avenue line, which is the 4, 5, and 6, to go to a place like Grand Central, then take the shuttle, and then take an uptown train to get to 50th Street. So you have to understand that you just can't have one route to get someplace. You have to have alternate routes and an alternate plan in case one subway line gets delayed or another subway line gets delayed. Also, you would need to understand how the buses work, because if the subways aren't working, then you might have to take a bus if you hope to get to work on time. So you have to have a comprehensive plan for how you're going to travel here in New York City. You have to understand how the subways work, you have to understand how the buses work, and you have to understand how the streets work. Now in Manhattan, when it comes down to Manhattan, primarily Fifth Avenue is the dividing line between the East Side and the West Side. Once you come into past, I think it's 125th Street or something like that, and on the East Side, that's with the Lexington, Third, Park. No, that's Lexington, Park, Madison, and Third, or something like that, and then Second and First Avenue. Now on the West Side is Avenue of the Americas, 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, Broadway, 8th Avenue, 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, 11th Avenue, and 12th Avenue. And you have to know the difference between the East Side and the West Side if you're in Manhattan. Now in the Bronx, it's a little bit more complicated, and you have to know that there's the South Bronx is past is like I think from 169th Street to 149th Street, and then once you not 169th Street, it's like once you get past Fordham Road, that's like the South Bronx, and then further up is Riverdale and the rest of the Bronx, and you have to understand the difference between the different areas, but that takes time. It's a bit of a learning curve, but once you have lived in the city for a while, you start learning how the subways work, how the buses work, and how to develop a strategy for getting yourself to work on time. There's a big challenge in all of that. Surviving here in New York City, you have to understand how everything works, and you have to understand how to work with things in a very fast pace. That's the big challenge of living here in New York, is learning how fast things are, because everything here is very, very fast, and you have to learn very quickly, because people here, they really don't have a lot of patience, and they really are really demanding, very demanding here. They expect a lot, and they expect a lot very quickly of people. You can make a living for yourself here, and if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere, because this is one of the most competitive cities in the United States, if not the world. And you have to have you have to have your head on straight if you come here, because it is very competitive, it's very fast paced, it's very aggressive, and you have to really build up a very thick skin when you come here in New York, because a lot of people here are very hostile. A lot of people here are very rude, and you have to learn how to take people and with a grain of salt, because you might bump into somebody on a train and they may start getting angry, and you have to learn how to just shake it off and then go on with the rest of your day. Or some guy may start saying something, and you just have to learn to just keep on walking. You have to develop a very thick skin here when you come here to New York City, because a lot of people are very rude. A lot of people are very hard, and if you come here, you're going to have to deal with a lot of hard people, a lot of rough people, and a lot of people who are very critical, and some people are very cynical. So you have to have a strong resolve and a strong sense of character, because this is not a place for people who are very soft, or can't take any sort of criticism, or can't take a difference of opinion, because here in New York there are different whole groups of different people living in different areas. There are different viewpoints, different ideas, different cultures, and you have to just learn how to see. If you see something you disagree with, see and not see, and hear and not hear. That's something I had to do when I was walking down Times Square, and there were all these topless women walking around looking to take pictures. I was going to take a package for one of my family members to the Toys R Us when it was open there, and I just saw the topless women. I just said, okay, that's just nothing to worry about, and just kept on walking. And that's something you're going to have to learn how to do when you see a lot of craziness here, because there's a lot of people who do crazy stuff here, and instead of paying attention to it, you're just going to have to learn to just keep walking and walk right by it. That's something that I've learned how to do growing up as a kid here, and that's something I've learned to do as an adult, is just keep on walking when I see things. And that's how you survive here, and that's one of the ways you survive here in New York City, because again, it is not a place for amateurs. It's not a place for greenhorns. Those guys usually wind up falling apart in a year and not surviving, because they don't have those survival skills. They don't know how rough it is. They come in here with rose-colored glasses, and then they wind up getting played by con men, hustlers, and other assorted predators here in places like Times Square, because they see guys like that coming, and they see an easy target. You have to take the target off your back and be able to walk right by things and focus on what you want to do. Now, when it comes down to New York, again, it's very competitive, and if you're not in the right place here, you won't be here for that long. I'm hoping this helps you learn what you need to survive here in New York City, and if you need me to give you any more information, I'd be glad to do it in another video. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct titles, you may do so by clicking a link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.